Are you all really ready for a change? That change in a Rainwater Henry administration would absolutely happen. We want to reduce government spending and taxation. How do we do that? We cut out the fat. We cut out the corruption. We cut out the misspending. And I've seen behind this curtain in the state of Indiana under the current administration, and I can tell you right now, there's a lot of fat to cut out.
Yep.
There are a lot of things that we're spending money on as a state that we do not need to be spending money on. I have seen behind the curtain. I have seen what some of these administrations do. I have felt what some of these administrations do. I want to improve military and veterans programs, and I did a lot of that here in the state of Indiana. I worked hard reforming the Big Four and the veterans organizations back together and assembling them into a unit that pushed for veterans legislation across the state, and we were very successful at what we did. We got a lot of things done for the state of Indiana for veterans. We got a lot of things changed, and the current administration tried to block those changes administratively after those laws were changed. We created veterans programs that were to benefit the veterans in the state of Indiana, and the current administration in the Indiana Department of Veterans Affairs, before the current director, had destroyed that opportunity during his direction. He was not complying with what these legislators had passed. This is the type of stuff that we've been fighting against as activists and advocates here in the state of Indiana. It's deep-seated corruption. It's deep-seated stuff that's going on that we need to do changes to these ethic laws. We need to make sure that people who come forward with information are protected from repercussions that may come back on them for those, for revealing that information. And I want to help reform cannabis laws, because when I was doing veteran advocacy, cannabis was a big issue. And cannabis is a big issue not only for veterans, but across the state of Indiana. People are looking for another safer substance outside of opioids, outside of benzodiazepine medications that are absolutely lethal, and they are killing people. When we have lethal medications that are purchased over the counter and people do not have access to a non-lethal medication or a substance such as cannabis, something is terribly wrong with our health care. Anyone can go in and buy over-the-counter medications, and they are lethal at doses, at the purchased doses. No one's ever died of cannabis. And veterans and other people in the state of Indiana are looking for a solution, and they need a solution now. The support that the Rainwater Henry campaign has gained over the last couple weeks has been tremendous. And I want to thank you all for all of that. And I want to encourage you, I want to charge you with getting back out into your communities and pushing for Rainwater Henry in your communities. Telling everyone that you know, everyone that you love, who wants a change, who wants something different here in the state of Indiana, to vote for Rainwater Henry. This means so much. This means so much for the state of Indiana and could change the course of history. Let's do this together. Real change for real people. Let's do it here in the state of Indiana. Thank you all so much. Have a great night.
Getting rid of corruption, reforming cannabis laws. That's what real people want in this state. Some good change for real people. Another quick story from the campaign trail. I just came off 10 years on the Libertarian National Committee, and toward the middle of July and August, my wife was looking at me and saying, go do something else. Get out of the house. Find something else to do. And Don reached out to me, and a couple other people did, and we sat down and talked. At that time, Don was running the whole campaign by himself and was a frazzled mess and needed help. So I came on to the campaign as campaign manager first week or so of August. We have recruited a campaign staff, many of whom are here today, of 12 or 13 different people. They are doing great jobs, tremendous stuff. And I have to tell you, in the past week, the Rainwater for Indiana campaign has raised $160,000. I've known Don for a few years. He's a great advocate for Libertarian Party, for personal freedom, for change, and an advocate for the people of Indiana. I give you Don Rainwater, the next president, the next governor of the state of Indiana.
Who are you? Good evening. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem.
There you go.
My name's Donald Rainwater. I'm the Libertarian candidate for governor here in the state of Indiana. And those words were said 40 years ago by President Ronald Reagan. And they have never been more applicable to the state of Indiana than they are today. We have multiple crises in Indiana. We have a health crisis. We have an economic crisis. We have an education crisis. And most importantly right now, we have a crisis of government. Our constitutional republic was built on the idea that the people's voice should be heard. But that doesn't happen today in the state of Indiana. We have one man who is unilaterally deciding who is essential and who is not. What businesses provide the necessities of life and which do not. And he has not engaged the people's voice, the Indiana General Assembly, in any governance for the last 6 months. I believe that that is wrong. I believe that you individually have the right to self-rule, to self-governance. That's what this nation was built on, and we need to get our government back as citizens and stop allowing the state of Indiana to treat us as subjects.
There you go.
I've talked to a lot of people over the last few months. Yesterday, I was up in Jonesboro at the Jonesboro River Rally, and there was a gentleman that walked up to me and told me that he had been a Republican his entire life. He was a veteran, a disabled veteran, a business owner until the state of Indiana shut him down. And he looked at me and he said, I've read what you're about, and you've got my vote, because I cannot stand and let the government tell me what I can and can't do any longer. Woo! Yeah! We need self-rule again in Indiana. I intend to bring your freedoms back to you and let you do as you desire, as long as you don't hurt somebody else or take their stuff. I intend to do that by eliminating the individual income tax in the state of Indiana. I want to eliminate the personal property tax on your primary residence, because if you have to pay them to keep it, it's not really yours. Yep. I want to make sure that as citizens of the state of Indiana, you are able to exercise your Second Amendment rights without a permit, because the Second Amendment is your permit. We will get constitutional carry in Indiana. And in order to ensure that we are able to recover from the economic crisis that government put us in, because make no mistake, it wasn't the virus that caused the economic crisis, it was the government.
Yep.
We will get cannabis in all forms legalized and decriminalized so that we can invigorate our economy and so that we can ensure that those who need safe pain management options are able to get them. But I can't do this by myself, folks. I need your help. We need your financial support, and I need you to go out and I need you to talk to people. People ask me all the time, you need to get, or say to me, you need to get your name out there because I just heard of you. Well, evidently I'm getting my name out because you just heard of me. How did you hear of me? Well, somebody told me about you. And that's how we do it. Radio and TV is great, but your friends and your family will find more value in your endorsement of our campaign than any commercial. So I need you to go out there and talk to people and let them know it is time for better government, not bigger government, in the state of Indiana. My name's Don Rainwater, and I need your vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
Boom.
Don Rainwater as governor of Indiana would be a hell of a real change for real people of Indiana, wouldn't it? Get organized here for a minute. Okay, people, it's time for the main event. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you again and welcome you again for your support this evening. Please give another round of applause for both Will Henry, Lieutenant Governor for Indiana, and Don Rainwater, Governor of Indiana. Without any further ado, we know you're all with her, and she's with us, your next President of the United States of America, Dr. Jo Jorgensen.
Woo!
Thank you for coming out on a gorgeous day. Thank you for having such a gorgeous day today. I want to start off by explaining to you how my grandmother gave me the love of my country. That when I was little, she used to explain to me how in the old country, because she was an immigrant, how in the old country it didn't matter how much you worked. It didn't matter if you worked a second or third job. The government took away the extra money so that everybody was left with the same. And listening to her, it sounds almost like she's from an Eastern Bloc country or, maybe the Soviet Union. Actually, she was from Denmark. And unfortunately, we're headed towards Denmark more every year. So it was my grandmother's vision of liberty and the basic principles of the Libertarian Party that bring me here today. You saw our bus here. We've been crisscrossing the country talking with a lot of voters. And what we keep hearing from the voters time and time again is that the old system isn't working. And rather than waiting for politicians to wise up, which they're not going to since they caused the problem, I think that you know best what's best for you, and that's why I'm asking for your vote for President of the United States. As your president, I will get government out of the way so my grandmother's vision of the American dream can be a reality for us all. Our current government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, too intrusive. And besides, what gives them the right? We need to put the decision-making power back into your hands because you can spend your money better than any special interest lobbyist or bureaucrat in Washington can. Americans would never budget to spend $80 billion every year to keep families apart from their loved ones. But that's exactly what our government does with its prison system. We cannot claim to be the land of the free when we lead the world in incarcerations. We have 5% of the world's population, but house 20% of its prisoners. And one of the biggest factors that led to a quadrupling of our prison population since 1980 is the racist and destructive war on drugs. In particular, mandatory minimums have taken discretion out of the hands of judges and instead forced mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters to be put in jail for 10, 20 years, even for life, for a supposed crime that has no victim. All we have to do is take a step back to look at the Prohibition era to see parallels. Despite realizing how poorly alcohol prohibition went, we have replaced it with a carbon copy. Drug kingpins have replaced mob bosses, and drug dens have replaced speakeasies. When was the last time you heard of a liquor store owner wandering up and down the halls of a high school trying to push gin on high school students? Or when's the last time you heard of a vodka addict breaking into houses in order to support a vodka habit? And last, when's the last time you heard of two liquor store owners having a shootout over who gets the best corner? What we have now is not a drug problem. What we have is a prohibition problem. There should be no law to prevent you from owning an object, whether it's a gun to protect yourself or drugs for whatever reason you wish. If there is no victim, there is no crime. As your president, I will federally decriminalize all drugs and encourage states to treat drug use as a health issue, not a criminal issue. We should allow the medical community to deal with substance abuse in ways that salvages lives instead of throwing them away. Accordingly, I will pardon anyone convicted at the federal level of victimless crimes. These are just a few steps towards ending the over-incarceration of people of color and letting consensual adult activities become safer and destigmatized. In addition to overcrowding our federal prisons, the war on drugs has negatively affected our communities with interactions that many people have with the police. The drug war has single-handedly created gangs that police themselves, often through violence. Consequently, the federal government has created a police state, including the Drug Enforcement Administration, which receives over $3 billion of our tax dollars annually. They have repeatedly raided medical marijuana clinics in states where medical marijuana is perfectly legal. Long gone, unfortunately, is a friendly local patrol officer who walks the beat and knows everyone in the neighborhood by name. Instead, the federal government has imported nameless, faceless SWAT teams that make us feel like enemy combatants in our own neighborhoods. And it doesn't end with the DEA. In recent months, we have seen the Department of Homeland Security, which receives another $50 billion in tax dollars, patrolling our streets in military fatigues and armored cars. As your president, I will defund federal involvement in policing, including the DEA and DHS. That means ending the supplying of surplus military equipment like tanks and tear gas to over 8,000 federal, state, and local police forces. I will end no-knock raids, which too often end up killing innocent bystanders like Perhaps worst of all, as Libertarian Congressman Justin Amash has brought up, when police do misbehave, it's nearly impossible to take legal action against the police because of an arcane doctrine known as qualified immunity, which states that victims can only successfully sue an officer when clear civil rights violation has already been established in a prior case. When I am president, I will end qualified immunity so police are held to the same standard as everyone else. While millions of Americans have suffered from government's war on drugs, almost every American has suffered from the COVID-19 pandemic in some way. South Korea confirmed its first coronavirus case within a day of our first case and quickly jumped ahead in testing, which contained the spread. As infections in the U.S. skyrocketed, South Korea nearly eradicated COVID-19, and they did so without any shutdowns. A testing initiative done by Bill Gates was the first to roll out tests that could be done outside the hospitals in the U.S. Over the course of 10 weeks, they had processed 20,000 tests. But on May 12th, the FDA stopped them from further testing and said they needed, quote, further assessment, end quote. This is just one example of how the FDA worsened the COVID-19 crisis and made it extremely difficult for anyone to get tested. And currently, only those companies with enough money and resources are even able to get FDA approval. And once they do, they weaponize our patents to hold a monopoly. It costs about $1 billion to get a drug to market. And thanks to the FDA, it's about a 10-year process. Meanwhile, it's the patients who suffer, desperately waiting for drugs that just might save their lives. New medicines and procedures should get to patients as quickly and safely as possible. When I am your president, I will get rid of the efficacy requirements of the FDA, if not the FDA entirely. The FDA is not the only issue with the American healthcare system. Let's be honest, it's not working for anyone. And my heart breaks for the millions of Americans who've left behind, those families who've been bankrupted. Now, for decades, we've had politicians in Washington blame the free market system, and therefore we need to go to a single payer system. Well, I have some news for them. We haven't had anything close to a free market in nearly a century.
Say it.
The alternative to our current big government failure isn't an even bigger government failure. When politicians say we need Medicare for all, what I'm hearing them say is we need VA hospital for all. This top-down monopoly is unacceptable for any person, let alone those who are willing to sacrifice their lives for our country. We cannot wait for government bureaucrats to decide who lives and who dies. We must put control back in the hands of people, in the hands of the patient. As I see it, the biggest problem with the American healthcare system is that our health insurance isn't really insurance at all. If you look in any other industry, insurance only pays for unexpected results. Therefore, insurance prices are held relatively low. In our system, though, insurance pays for everything. Imagine if our car insurance paid for gas, oil, car washes. First of all, you would have absolutely no reason to shop around for the best gasoline prices. In fact, you'd probably go to either the store that's closest to you or the most expensive store, because they might give you free coffee while you wait. I mean, what do you care? You just give them your $5 copay. You don't care how much it costs. You probably wouldn't even know how much it costs, because they would have no reason to compete, and they would simply raise their prices and pass it on to the insurance companies. And then the next year you'd be stuck with higher car insurance bills. This is exactly what's happening to our healthcare system. There's absolutely no reason for anybody to shop around for better prices when it comes to healthcare, and no reason for healthcare providers to even compete on prices, because they simply pass along the higher costs to the insurance companies. So the insurance companies charge higher prices without any accountability, and we're the ones left footing the bill. The two systems that I've been going around the country talking about are, first of all, the one in Singapore, which is catastrophic care and which has healthcare costs that are about a third of those of what they are in America. And by the way, their doctor visits are only $10, which are less than our co-pays here. And the other system I've been talking about is actually in the state of Indiana, the State of Indiana Employees Union. When that system first started, which by the way, it was voluntary, only a small minority of people signed up who were able to. But by the second year, about 75% signed up because they realized that this was a good system. And in doing so, they started driving down prices. In fact, before the system started, only about 10% of the drugs bought were generic, which you would expect because you never spend somebody else's money as well as you spend your own. And yet, within a few short years, 90% of the drugs being bought were generic. And the best part is they were happy to do it because they got to keep the savings. And that's the way it should be. If you go around and you shop for a computer or a car or groceries or anything, if you save money, you get to keep the savings. That's the way it should be in healthcare, and that's the way it should be for the VA system. What I would do is I would put money into the pockets of veterans, the same way the state of Indiana has done, and let veterans decide how and when and where to use their healthcare dollars. Now, the government letdown of our soldiers does not begin with healthcare. It starts from the time they are enlisted. In fact, there are people fighting overseas who are currently deployed, who weren't even born when the war on terror began. The U.S. spends more on military than the next 7 countries combined. We are in about 160 countries around the globe. And what do we have to show for it? In the last 20 years alone, over 500,000 people in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Pakistan have been killed, including 250,000 civilians. Those are parents, siblings, and children who will never return home. In every election, candidates promise more peace, but they only deliver more war. If I'm elected president, my very first official act will be to bring the troops home. Thank you for that. I want to turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. Our military must be trained to defend our shores, but we have to stop meddling around the world and make peace with our world neighbors. Unfortunately, the military budget is far from the only example of how the government has misdirected the economy. The IRS taxes Americans at every turn, and the tax system is so complicated that only those who can afford personal accountants or tax lawyers can even navigate the code. And that same IRS that taxes us to death probes every personal financial decision we make in order to decide how much we should spend. Meanwhile, the government itself accumulates more debt. Now, some people in Washington say we need to increase military spending, while the other half say we need to increase domestic spending. So what's our bipartisan compromise? To increase all spending. As your president, my veto pen is going to need a lot of extra ink. Runaway spending is also made possible by the Federal Reserve. When the federal government isn't able to raise taxes, it simply prints more money. And without any backing, the Fed, since the Fed was created over 100 years ago, the American dollar has lost 96% of its value. We need to reduce regulations to allow cryptocurrency and any other form of currency to enter the market. As your president, I will first audit and then end the Federal Reserve. I will eliminate the IRS and work with Congress towards eliminating the federal income tax altogether. It's time to move money out of the government sector and back to the people who earned it. Politicians and bureaucrats don't know what you need. You do. When it comes to cutting spending, we cannot take any solutions off the table. I would encourage baseline budgeting, which instead of assuming an increase, we start at zero every year, and then we decide what's vital. It's time for the government to balance its checkbook the same way American families do. Now, given the challenges we face as a country, it's easy to feel like the change I'm talking about just can't happen. But I believe it can because I believe in you. I believe in the individuals who make up our great country. And I see America through my grandmother's eyes, a place where the rights of the individual are greater than the power of government, a place where liberty means minimum government and maximum freedom, a place where the American dream isn't a dream at all, it's real and it's right there in front of you because you made it happen. As I ask for your vote for president, I'm not asking you to cast a vote for me. Instead, I think you should vote for you. You know best how your money should be spent. You know best what your family priorities are. You know best what's best for you. Thank you very much. And I would love to take some questions.
If you could form a line right here, speak clearly into the microphone, and I'm going to hold the microphone for the whole time. Thank you.
You're on crutches, but you're on heels.
I'm sorry?
You're on crutches, but you're also wearing heels.
Oh, yeah, it's not my feet that hurt, it's my right hip where I fell on the ice a few years ago and I think I re-injured it a few days ago, so.
I've heard you play hockey.
Yes, that's how I fell on the ice. I forgot that when you're 60 years old, you don't have the balance you had as a 20-year-old. So I learned the hard way, literally, the hard ice. That's very hard to fall on.
I admire you very much.
Thanks.
Another question?
Thank you, Joe. Watson Pernita, Battle for Freedom. I have a couple questions. One, everybody wants smaller government. We agree, right? But I have yet to hear any candidate on the federal, state, or local level say, what are we as citizens going to do to be responsible? We want the government to stop spending, but we spent $1.4 billion on Black Friday last year. And we are struggling to make our payments, but we can spend all kinds of money. I want to hear candidates say, learn budgets. Learn financial stability. Learn to be responsible with what you're doing, because if we want the government to spend less, We need to send people with the capability to send less to be in government.
Yeah, absolutely. The people in government definitely are not good role models for us. And I would say that it's kind of given us an attitude that somehow we defy the laws of physics. That somehow, Venezuela, they have horrible monetary policies, and so they pay the price. But somehow, simply by being Americans, the law of gravity doesn't apply to us. And it's very scary. So, and in addition to that, you've got the federal government, for instance, handing out loans to students saying, oh, don't worry. And what do the loans do? It floods the market, so now colleges raise the rates. And so now they're kind of chained around the neck. But notice the government says that you can't declare bankruptcy from the student loan like you can other corporations. Of course, they have rules specially made for themselves. So we have been going in the wrong direction for just so long. And I would say that we need to get back going in the right direction. And even like education, where there's at least $500, depending on how you do the math, $500 to $1,500 is going to the federal government to pay for education that if it had stayed home, then teachers wouldn't be having to pay for their own Kleenex boxes and crayons instead of having, instead of having teachers pay for that. So the whole system is upside down. You're absolutely right. And I think if we, if Americans start learning the law of physics and politicians act the way they act, then maybe we can get back to where we were before. Thanks.
Thank you. The second one is, can you clean up just when the debates come on the idea of the victimless crime? Because I know of a lot of families that are destroyed because of drug addictions. Families, the victims are the children of divorce. The victims are the children of abuse and so much more. So as you explained that, I understand that the government has a role to get away from drugs, but there are still victims that are involved in this area. And I think that there needs to be a little bit of clarification on that. But you don't have to tell it to me now, just when you're approached on it in the debate. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hello. I have a question for you. As the President of the United States, you're both sworn in for both domestic and foreign parties, okay, to protect this country. Now, if you become President of the United States, are you going to close down the Department of Children's Services, which is obviously destroying the family unit for America?
Wait, if I'm President of the United States, am I going to close down what?
The Department of Children's Services.
DCS.
Oh, that should not be done at the federal level. And that's a problem with the federal government, is it's involved in every local issue. For instance, education is a local issue. It should be decided among parents, teachers, and students. And it should be up to different localities because there are different needs in different places. Charity was handled just fine by local by local people, and then the federal government gets involved, and what happens? Poverty, the decline of poverty stalls. So every time the federal government gets involved, there is a huge price. And I would get rid of the Department of Education, and basically the role of the federal government should be the military and some of the court system, and even the police, I would say, should be at the local level, not the federal. So thank you.
I have one other question. What are you going to do to turn around and get rid of half the laws that this country doesn't need anymore?
Turn around, I'm sorry.
What are you going to do as president to get rid of half of the laws that are on the books today that we don't need anymore?
To get rid of which laws that are?
Half of the laws that are
half the
currently-
laws. Yeah, and that is a problem. Some of the things I can do on my own, such as bringing the troops home. That as commander-in-chief, I can do that on the first day. I don't need help. For something like the Department of Education, I would need the help of Congress. However, what I would do is I would tell them that I'm not going to agree to sign any bill that's not balanced and that's not smaller than the year before. With laws, what I can do, or with drug laws, my understanding is I can do that through the Attorney General, and I can, of course, pardon people. So there are a lot of things I can do on my own. But you're right, I can't do everything, but I would do a heck of a lot more than any other president has done. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Liberty, a libertarian, and my question for you is, so my fiance and I are both working to be bail agents in Indiana, and what's concerning to me is a lot of this bail reform being pushed to get rid of surety bail, which is what we want to work in, and instead put bail onto the taxpayer dollars and letting people out without somebody holding them accountable. So my question to you is, what do you want to do to help keep the bail industry from costing the taxpayer dollars and protect people working in surety like me and my fiance, Cody?
That's a state issue, right? State and local?
Yes, it can be, but from a national standpoint, what is your thought?
Yeah, I mean, from a national standpoint, that I put it this way, that wouldn't be at the top of my list. That's mostly a state and local issue, and I think that anytime you get the federal government involved in state and local issues, you pay a high price, such as we're paying with the Department of Education, such as even like highway funds. People said, oh, wouldn't it be great to have the federal government help us with highways? So what do? We send our taxes in, and then we've got somebody like Elizabeth Dole, who's Transportation Secretary, saying, well, I'm not going to give you your money back unless you raise the drinking age. Now, you could argue that 21 is a better drinking age, but I would suggest that that's not up to the federal government. It should be up to each state. So I'm not going to overstep my bounds. I'm going to let states take care of their state business. Thanks.
Hi, so you've spoken about a lot about general health care, but what I want to know specifically, having a sister with autism, I want to know specifically what you can do for people with disabilities, especially after they age out of the school system and they're on their own if they can't take care of themselves as adults.
Yeah, get the federal government out of the way. They've only made things worse. First of all, it was the federal government who in the 1960s said, you know what, it's inhumane to house people with mental disabilities, other disabilities into what they called mental hospitals back then. And so they said, wouldn't it be better if they were helped better at a local level, at community centers? So what do? They let all of the patients out before there's any community centers. And so now if you look, there have been estimates that a third of the people who are homeless have some type of mental disability, a third have some type of substance abuse, which now there's nobody to handle that. So again, if you want the government to do something, it's just going to mess it up anyway. And I would suggest that the private charity can do a much better job. And if you look at United Way, in the early 90s, the president spent something like $400,000 on artwork. And they said, look, spiffing up the halls. And donations dried up. People who were donating money said, no, we gave you that money to help unwed mothers, to help people with disabilities, help people with mental disorders. And we didn't give you that money for fancy schmancy artwork. And by the way, it'd be worth about $1 million today. So the United Way had to really work hard to gain the trust. If you were to ask the federal government, let's say, to help people with disabilities or anything else, then you'd have what you have right now, which is a horrible system that has perverse incentives where people are incentivized to have their families break up. And if you look at the money, we know that the federal government has huge overhead. Just look at the $600 hammers we all heard about. But there's no accountability. People can't say, no, I'm not going to continue to support that. So by allowing people who are concerned about people with disabilities and getting government out of the way, we can better serve them. Thanks.
How you doing, ma'am? So I have a question from my buddy in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He wanted me to ask it for him. He asked you how you plan to prevent corporate corruption without making government regulation, because you plan on privatizing nearly everything.
Get rid of corporate corruption. when you privatize stuff?
Yeah, just get rid of corporate corruption without making government regulation. How do you plan on regulating everything from corporate crooks, basically? Because this is a capitalistic state.
That's the beauty of the free market, is they do it. In fact, when I received my PhD in industrial organizational psychology, one of my professors was very much a liberal. And when we were talking about FedEx and UPS, he said, now you know, it's not just the federal government that has a bureaucracy, they have bureaucracies too. And I said, yeah, but I don't have to pay for it if I don't want to. If the UPS gets too corrupt or increases prices so much, I'll go to FedEx. If their prices go up too much, I'll go to DHL, whoever. So it's through people working for you who go out of business when they don't serve you that things are going to go well. In fact, you can clap, thank you. I thought that was a pretty good answer. In fact, I had bought a house and it was a brand new house, and the builder had done a horrible job. The wood in the kitchen started curling up, and in the guest bathroom, the hot water, the hot and cold water were opposite. So if you turned the cold water, you instead you got hot water. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm glad my grandmother wasn't, here getting scalded. And I found out about 6 months later that the builder went out of business. And I thought, well, good, because and that's what happens in the free market. If you don't do a good enough job, if you pad it too much, if you don't treat your customers right. And last, I will point out that, we had the Disney company in the early 90s giving benefits to partners of their gay employees. And that was 20 years before Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were still saying that gay marriage should be illegal. So the free market has to work for us, because if they don't, then we don't buy their business, we don't work for them, and they go under. But the federal government is unaccountable. Thanks.
I have one more thing, sorry. This one's near to me because I'm a big advocate for veteran suicide, and you did bring up your PhD in organizational and industrial psychology. I was in the Army in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 82nd Airborne for 4 years, and we had, so I deployed with the 82nd Airborne, and coming home I had 2 buddies actually get blown up by a VBID in Afghanistan. So I had a lot of buddies resort to not really having it out, and seen a couple of buddies actually attempt suicide. So I was just wondering, how would you make it basically, because when people come to terms with suicide stuff and they bring it forward, they're basically criminalized, they're basically put into a different box. How do you make that mental health more of an issue to, how am I saying this? How do you make mental health an issue that's more broad to people, where it doesn't have to bring police or anything into it?
Yeah, 2 things. First of all, we bring the soldiers home and they protect our shores and not the shores of everybody else. And people are surprised when they hear that those deployed overseas are more libertarian and were huge supporters of Ron Paul. They said it doesn't make any sense. Ron Paul wants to bring the troops home. Why do all of the donations to Ron Paul, or why do the donations to Ron Paul, a single candidate, total more than all the other Republican donations combined? Well, it's because they're the ones over there seeing that. And in fact, I was in Wisconsin, in which I was talking with somebody who said, I saw things over there that nobody should ever see. Well, how do you think that people get PTSD and some of these disabilities? So we bring them home and we have them defend our shores and not put them in places where they shouldn't be. And then again, we allow veterans to have charge of their own healthcare dollars. So if they choose to go to a psychologist instead of a medical doctor, that they're able to do that. Or even alternative health. That's up to them. It shouldn't be up to the federal government. Thanks.
Yeah, I got a question regarding, you're talking about qualified immunity again on the police, but what about the prosecutors? Because it really does need to go from the top down, because prosecutors get immunity, and there's people in jail today because they're more worried about a case closure than doing what's right.
You know, that's a good question, and I'm going to remember to ask my team about this because, yes, I recently learned that there's also qualified immunity for judges as well. Goes right on up the line. I mean, my instinct says that there's not a reason to have qualified immunity for anybody, but I hate to say that without looking at all the ramifications, but I think you do bring up an excellent point. Thanks.
Good evening, Dr. Joe.
Hey.
How will you fortify yourself and your administration against outside influences trying to meddle in United States politics?
By making it so small they don't want to meddle. That's why people are begging for term limits, which I'm somewhat on the side of, but it doesn't solve the problem. As long as there's money and power to be had, people are going to go after it. So you get rid of the money, get rid of the power, and people are going to stop going after it.
Thank you.
I have more of a controversial topic. Do you believe that felons of any degree should have their constitutional rights stripped, such as the Second Amendment and their voting rights?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If you are so dangerous that you can't be trusted with a gun, you should still be in prison. If you've done your time and you're out on the streets, you should not have your right to self-defense be taken away from you, period. And of course, voting as well. If you've done your time, you've done your time. And first of all, I am a gun owner. But even if I weren't, I still come down strongly on the Second Amendment, on the side of the Second Amendment. I would get rid of every gun law in the last 100 years and do everything I could to keep the egregious red flag laws from being put in place.
So I have a little bit of a personal question. In 2017, I joined the Marine Corps, and when I joined and they asked me my religious views, I was berated and humiliated for being a Norse pagan because of government regulation into the religious sector. And actually in my home state of Michigan, if you want to start a pagan church, it costs over 10 times as much as starting a Christian church. What are you going to do to stop government regulations on religious freedom?
Well, just like the military shouldn't discriminate against gays, bisexual, transgenders, they certainly shouldn't discriminate against religion, so I'm not sure why there would be a reason to even ask that. And secondly, as far as starting up a new church, again, that's a state issue, and I don't want to overreach with the federal government, but people as we've seen with the exodus of people leaving California, I think that states will have to start listening to people as they lose more of their citizens. So, thanks.
Hi, Joe. Thanks. Obviously, we live in a very globalized economy now. I was wondering if you think the government should play any role in regulating that or fighting any of those battles, where we have our corporations are battling other corporations in other parts of the world, where those countries are maybe modifying their currencies, playing those kind of games. And we also have situations where government or corporations here are taking advantage of, what could almost be defined as slave labor on the other side of the world, to reduce prices and things like that. Do you think the government plays any role in regulating that, or do you think consumers should just choose with their dollars?
Yeah, no, I don't think that the federal government should get involved with other countries. I think that, first of all, Americans should get involved. And, we saw, in fact, trying to think back to like the Kathy Lee Gifford, how horrified she was when she found out they were using slave labor and people were saying, no, we're not going to buy your stuff. But just in general, we want to be good neighbors with the other people, and I'm sure you've heard where goods cross borders, troops don't have to. And so we need to be open to trade. And, Japan bombed us in World War II. That's what got us in. And first of all, some historians say it's because of the trade laws, but also they're not going to bomb us now because we buy so many Toyotas and Hondas from them. And I would say I don't want to get into that situation with China. We absolutely cannot get into a war with China because we could obliterate each other. So let's be good trading partners with China and allow free trade so that China has no reason to bomb us. And again, people are standing up and they're saying, hey, I'm not going to buy from that company. In fact, even this surprised me. There was a company made the news when they fired a woman for writing "All Lives Matter" on her personal Facebook. And so that just shows that, and you know, notice she wasn't discriminating against a coworker, employee, vendor, supervisor. So that just shows that companies do care what other people think about them. And I think, you know, once again, you're asking federal government to solve a problem when federal government, they're the ones creating the problems. Thanks.
First of all, thanks for coming to Indiana.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and then...
and by the way, you know I'm a Midwestern girl, right? Born and raised in Northern Illinois, so I feel like a neighbor here.
So I 100% agree with your stance on the Department of Education. It's too much money, and it's not like we're making people smarter anymore. But what I don't know is, moving forward, what are examples of where this can work outside of the federal government being in control of it? Anywhere around the globe, or just good examples of how we could make it work moving forward if we abolish it.
Making education work without the federal government?
Right, examples of it.
How about the United States before the 1970s? I would point to that. Again, education is a local issue, and the federal government shouldn't be telling local schools what to do because the needs in different places are different. The needs in Indiana are different than the needs in rural Appalachia or downtown New York City. And by the way, I would suggest, I'm horrified that Donald Trump is up there saying you need to open up your schools. I mean, people are different, counties are different, the virus is different in different places, you've got different populations, and you've got people with different feelings. I believe in allowing people to vote with their feet or vote with their dollars. And also, you know, education is a great example about why we're so polarized. If, let's say, you want to send your kid to a prairie school and the neighbor doesn't, or you want to send your kid to a school that has vaccines and your neighbor doesn't. What you have to do right now is you have to battle it out. You have to each pick a candidate, you got to put out yard signs, you got to donate money, get all your friends to vote, and then on election day, one of you is going to win, one of you is going to lose, somebody's going to be unhappy. Why not allow people to vote with their feet, vote with their dollars? You send your kid to a school that has vaccines, has prayer, and your neighbor doesn't. I think we would get along so much better. I mean, imagine if the government said, okay, we're all going to vote on, are we all vegetarians or do we all eat steak? I mean, it's ridiculous that we all have to choose a one-size-fits-all. People should be given their own choice, and I think you'll see innovation go way up from there. Thanks.
All right, isn't Mama Jo incredible? I want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. Keep it going for Mama Jo and all the incredible speakers y'all heard tonight. Y'all are the ones who support all of them and get them elected. Y'all are what fuel this campaign and every single state campaign and local campaign. So keep giving yourselves a round of applause. All right, so we do need to fill the bus tank because we have a lot of other cities to go to, and this is the first time I'm going to challenge y'all directly with a state that is not a border state to y'all.